Pope Leo XIV has come out and condemned usury as a grave sin that leads to enslavement while also sharing a path to combat this wickedness. Roll this up over at culturecrusader.substack.com. You can find the link in the description below. As I said, Pope Leo XIV condemned the use of usury as a grave sin that leads to enslavement in an address to members of the National Anti-Usury Council on October 18th. I believe that National Anti-Usury Council is based out of Italy. In his address, Pope Leo XIV declared this: "The phenomenon of usury points to the corruption of the human heart. It is a painful and ancient story already attested to in the Bible. The prophets, in fact, denounced usury along with exploitation and every form of injustice towards the poor. How far God is from the attitude that crushes people to the point of enslaving them. It is a grave sin, at times very grave, because it cannot be reduced to a mere accounting issue. Usury can bring crisis to families. It can wear down the mind and heart to the point of leading people to think of suicide as the only way out." From there, he warned how usury can disguise itself as aid or help while in reality enslaving people. He says the negative dynamics of usury manifest themselves at different levels. There is a form of usury that apparently seems to want to help those in financial difficulty, but which soon reveals itself for what it is, a suffocating burden. The consequences are paid especially by fragile people, such as those who are victims of gambling. However, it also affects those who have to face difficult moments, such as, for instance, extraordinary medical treatment or unexpected expenses beyond their means or those of their families. What first presents itself as a helping hand in reality becomes, in the long run, a torment. Next, he warned how this grave sin can victimize people on a global scale, saying, unfortunately, usurious financial systems can bring entire peoples to their knees. Similarly, we cannot overlook those whose usurious and avaricious dealings lead to the hunger and death of their brethren in the human family. Their responsibilities are grave, and they fuel structures of iniquitous sin. As for how to deal with this grave sin, Pope Leo pointed to how Jesus interacted with the tax collector Zacchaeus, as documented in the Gospel of Luke. He said this, or in the Gospel, Jesus asked to stay at Zacchaeus' house, and while the crowd grumbled and said, "He has gone to stay at the house of a sinner," Zacchaeus responded with joy and declared he would give half of his possessions to the poor, and if he extorted anything, he would repay it 4 times over. Commenting on this gospel passage, Pope Leo said this: "The fact is that his encounter, Zacchaeus' encounter with Christ, transformed his heart, and then everything changed. Only generosity is so effective that it reveals to us the meaning of our humanity. When the pursuit of profit prevails, others are no longer people. They no longer have a face. They are just objects to be exploited, and so we end up losing ourselves and our souls. The conversion of those who engage in usury is just as important as closeness to those who suffer from usury." So, clear example of how we should be combating this grave sin of usury here. So I really like that he not only condemns it, he explains why it's wrong. He looks at the consequences of what happens when people engage in this sin. And then he also provides a path for us to combat against it and how we fight it. And we fight it through generosity. We fight it through keeping our head on our shoulders and seeing people for who they truly are, seeing their humanity and not seeing them as cogs in the machine or debasing them or looking down upon them. So really, really good advice here from Pope Leo, and as well as a strong condemnation of usury. And he's not alone in this. The church and the church fathers have done so for thousands of years. St. Augustine wrote this: "Keep yourselves from usury and extortionate interest. Don't have anything to do with moneylenders. Give them a wide berth." In fact, St. Augustine described it as not a way for earning a living, but of earning death. If you engage in usury, it's not a way of earning a living, but it is of earning death. Woe to the wretches who get their living by such means, because these are the means by which they get their death. It is better to be a beggar than to live by unlawful means. Similarly, St. John Chrysostom wrote this: nothing is baser than the usury of this world, nothing more cruel. Why other person's calamities are such a man's traffic. He makes himself gain of the distress of another and demands wages for kindness as though he were afraid to seem merciful. And under the cloak of kindness, he digs the pitfall deeper by the act of help galling a man's poverty, and in the act of stretching out the hand, thrusting him down, and receiving him as in harbor, involving him in shipwreck, as on a rock or shoal or reef. So obviously Pope Leo echoed both of what St. Augustine and St. John Chrysostom had to say there. Obviously, you can see that with St. John Chrysostom, where Pope Leo is warning about how usury disguises itself as aid, but it then actually turns into torment and enslavement. We also have St. Gregory of Nyssa. He wrote, money lending has no value and is rapacious. It is unfamiliar with such trades as agriculture and commerce. Money lending wants everything to be wild and begets whatever has been untilled. Usury's home is a threshing floor upon which the fortunes of the oppressed are winnowed and where it considers everything as its own. It prays for afflictions and misfortunes in order to destroy such persons. Money lending despises people contented with their possessions and treats them as enemies because they do not provide money. It watches courts of law to find distress in persons who demand payment and follows tax collectors who are a nest of vultures in battle array prepared for war. Money lending carries a purse and dangles bait as a wild beast to those in distress in order to ensnare them in their need. Daily it counts gain and cannot be satisfied. It is vexed by gold hidden in a person's home because it remains idle and unprofitable. Usury imitates farmers who immediately plant crops. It takes and gives money without gain while transferring it from one hand to another. And then we have Pope Leo's namesake, St. Leo the Great. He said this point too we have thought must not be passed over, that certain possessed with the love of base gain lay out their money at interest and wish to enrich themselves as usurers. For we are grieved that this is practiced not only by those who belong to the clergy, but also by laymen who desire to be called Christians. We decree that those who have been found guilty of receiving this filthy gain be punished severely, that all occasion of sinning be removed. So obviously there is tradition that Pope Leo XIV clearly is carrying on here with his condemnation of usury, and then he offers a way to combat it through the example of Jesus Christ in the way that he treated with Zacchaeus, asked to go into his home, and Zacchaeus converted from that generosity. And what does he say? He says that he will give over half of his possessions to the needy, and anyone that he had extorted, he will pay back fourfold. And that is exactly how we should be engaging with usury. And it's going to have to be fought, I think, at a basic level, given the fact that our systems are so overwhelmingly engaged in this grave sin. And so we have to really kind of work on a very kind of family level in order to combat it. And then hopefully, obviously, as more and more families work to remove themselves from these usurious systems, we can eradicate it from our society, work to get rid of it. So glad Pope Leo is speaking out on this. Really, really heartening to see. But let me know what you guys make of this. Let me know in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, especially to each other, and to always, always speak the truth.
Why would you be afraid of the people? Why are you not afraid of God instead of man?